Part 20. Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanbao. Chapter 191. Su Tianxian glanced at me and said, "As for whose reincarnation you are, that's a secret. I can't tell you." The same rhetoric again. Su Tianxian changed the topic and continued to explain, the double-faced Buddha of good and evil is Dara, one of the 9 evil spirits. Dara. I frowned. The position of the Twiluo star is in the Big Dipper floating star, which is a taboo when it turns into energy. Twiluo's nature is extremely vicious, cold, and not good at communicating with others. Because he is not good at being included in crowds, he is relatively lonely and keeps everything in his head. If there is a dispute, he does not seek a way to communicate first. Instead, he will hold grudges and harbor a secret desire for revenge, which makes people hard to guard against. The character of the good and evil double-faced Buddha is exactly the same as that of the evil star. Then, what is the 5 suns Lianzu? I asked. 5 suns in a row means killing 5 people. Once the good and evil double-faced Buddha kills 5 people with special fates, his strength will make a qualitative leap. So, the next thing you have to do is to stop the 5 suns Lianju. If you really let the good and evil double-faced Buddha complete the 5 suns Lianju, you will definitely die by then. As she spoke, Su Tianxuan's words came to an abrupt end. She pondered for a moment and said, "I think his purpose is not just as simple as getting you. I still need to investigate the specific matter." I nodded. I had expected this. Su Tianxian continued to answer my questions. As for the other world in the sky coffin, I don't know, because the sky coffin itself is a sacred object, and there are very few records about the sky coffin. I fell into deep thought after hearing this, hesitated for a moment, and expressed my inner guess. "Master, do you think there are 9 such worlds in the sky coffin? Are they distributed on floors?" This was originally a random guess on my part, but I never thought that. Su Tianxian nodded and said, "It's very possible." Later, Su Tianxian explained to me why it was so cumbersome to bury Qingyang evil star in 3 coffins. It turns out that the 9 evils cannot occupy my body in the sky coffin. In other words, the power of the evil stars in the sky coffin has been reduced to a certain extent. I asked, "Master, what should I do with my right eye?" Su Tianxian stretched out his slender hand, gently opened my eyelids, looked at it carefully and said, 9 evil spirits have robbed you of your 5 senses and limbs. In other words, they have taken away some of your abilities. When you and evil stars upon contact, these abilities return to you." After hearing this, I was slightly stunned. Then doesn't my right eye have the same special ability as my right hand? Su Tianxian changed the topic and said, "But if you want to truly master this power, you must attribute the evil star to your life palace. Otherwise, the evil spirit will enter your body." I suddenly realized that if I use the soul-stealing bloody hand now, I will not suffer the backlash of the evil spirit. Su Tianxian stood up and said to me, "I will find a way to restore vision to your right eye. One more thing, I'm hungry. I'll cook for you." As I said that, I stood up and walked towards the kitchen. Suddenly I thought of something, so I turned around and asked, "By the way, Master, what do you want to eat?" Su Tianxian thought for a moment and said, "Yangchun noodles." In the evening, Ruohong came to Jiyuntang and brought me a pair of sunglasses. According to her, if I go out now, I will definitely scare people, so I'd better cover it with sunglasses. After Ruohong left, Su Tianxian came to me and said, "Lu Su, you and Huaxiu get along well. She is not bad in nature and has a deep connection with you. It would be good for you to have more contact with her." I nodded. I felt an inexplicable affinity towards Huaxiu. I didn't know how this feeling came about. Just when I was about to go to bed at night, the wind blew violently in the bedroom, and a familiar figure appeared out of thin air. Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanbao. Chapter 192. Master Xiang. Why are you here? The person who came was none other than Xiang Yi. Xiang Yi pulled out the chair and sat on it. He crossed his legs and said to me, I don't have any money anymore. I'm asking you for some money. The corner of my mouth twitched slightly. I stood up, took out a wad of ghost money from the drawer and handed it to Xiang Yi. Xiang Yi took the ghost money with a smile on his face. When he saw my right eye, he immediately froze on the spot. Your eyes. I didn't say anything, just shook my head and smiled bitterly. Xiang Yi pondered for a moment, as if he knew everything, and stopped asking questions. Master Xiang, you are not just asking for money when you come to me, right? Xiang Yi nodded, his expression became a little solemn, and he said to me word by word, yes, I came to you for something, and it involves Wudeng Alley. Hearing this, my expression suddenly became nervous. Xiang Yi continued, I investigated the significance of the existence of Lightless Alley. I quickly asked, what? Xiang Yi took a deep look at me and said, cultivation of the god of void death from the souls of the dead. I was slightly stunned. I had never heard of the void death god. Xiang Yi seemed to see my doubts and explained to me, Kong Shensha, one of the 5 great evil spirits, is the main evil and ominous. People with the Konged fate will become evil after death and become disasters. Exist. After hearing these words, I remembered that Xiang Yi had told me before that the Lightless Alley was a plan laid out by a big shot in the underworld. However, since it was a person from the underworld, why would he cultivate such an ominous existence? I got rid of all the doubts in my mind. After hearing this, Xiang Yi pondered for a moment and explained to me, Tianfu City is a big tomb, where a dragon is buried. Legend has it that a dragon fell to death in Tianfu City, and the dragon's corpse was used by people with ulterior motives to create city magic tools. The resentment of the dragon's soul was overwhelming, and Tianfu City was noisy. Later, a powerful man passed by and used the feng shui of Tianfu City to suppress the dragon's soul and magical weapons underground in Tianfu City and build a dragon tomb. I have heard of this legend before, but it is not as detailed as Xiang Yi told it. But what does this dragon tomb have to do with the 5 great evil spirits? I fell into deep thought, and after a while I raised my head and asked, is it possible that the purpose of cultivating the god of void death is to break the feng shui bureau in Tianfu City? Open the dragon tomb and take out the magic weapon. Xiang Yi looked at me in surprise, the corners of his mouth and eyes trembling slightly, and said, you are really smart, that's probably what I mean. A city's feng shui array cannot be broken easily. If it is broken, the entire city will be plunged into dire straits. But why do the big shots in the underworld want to destroy the feng shui formation in Tianfu City? Wouldn't doing this mean that all living beings will be destroyed? Xiang Yi shrugged nonchalantly and said, I've already said he's a big shot. How do I know what he thinks? Besides, if that big shot finds out that his plan has been broken, you and I will lose our lives, so what else can we think about, common people? After saying that, Xiang Yi stood up and said, I originally thought that people with empty destiny do not exist in this world, but your master has been found. When the time comes, you can make up for the mistakes you made by bringing the evil spirit to Wudeng Alley. I nodded. Now that there is a solution to this matter, there is room for redemption. As for the specific matters, your master will talk to you. Also, give me a lot of ghost money, so little is not enough for me to spend. I was instantly pulled away from my thoughts just now. Xiang Yi is a money addict. After Xiang Yi said this, he disappeared. I lay in bed and couldn't sleep for a long time. I always felt that this matter was not as simple as I thought. The next day, I cooked for Su Tianxian as usual. After finishing the meal, Su Tianxian suddenly asked, has Xiang Yi visited you last night? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sky Coffin. Author, Ching Nian Wanba. Chapter 193. I nodded, and Su Tianxian continued, you can't do what he said. Why? Because the fate of the person killed by the 5 sons Lianzu is the 5 great evil spirits. I was stunned for a moment. When I heard Xiang Yi say this before, I felt that it was not that simple. I didn't expect that the truth of the matter was like this. Then, what should we do? Su Tianxian pondered for a moment and said, stop the 5 sons in a row. Once the 5 sons in a row is successfully completed, it will not be easy to get the evil star Duoluo to return to the palace. It seems that I can't stand on Xiang Yi's side this time. I hope you won't turn against him in the end. Su Tianxian glanced at the time, then picked up the book and said casually, at noon, someone will come to the store for help. You can receive him then. Su Tianxian will not let me do useless work. I guess this person must be related to the god of void death. Su Tianxian seemed to have thought of something, put down the books in his hands, took me to the 2nd floor, then took out a box from a room and handed it to me. There is coffin fungus in here. You can take it to Huaxiu to eat. As the name suggests, coffin fungus is a strain that grows in coffins. This strain is very rare in the world, comparable to Ganoderma lucidum, and has great medicinal value. In addition, the coffin fungus also contains a lot of yin energy, which is a great tonic for ghosts and zombies. I took the coffin fungus and came to Huaxiu's room. After much hesitation, I knocked on the door. After a moment, the door opened with a creak, and Huaxiu's beautiful face poked out. She gave me a cold look and said, is something wrong? I handed the box containing the coffin fungus in front of her and said, eating the stuff in this will be good for you. Huaxiu glanced at the box, then at me, then stretched out his slender hand to take the box, and I opened my mouth slightly to say something else. But Huaxiu didn't give me this chance and slammed the door. A wry smile appeared on my lips. Huaxiu's attitude towards me was very cold, but I had an illusion. Thought she was being mean to me. This feeling is like you snatching your sister's favorite toy and she is getting angry with you. At noon, I sat in front of the 8 immortals table and waited for that person to arrive. At about 1 o'clock, there was a knock on the door of Ji Yuntang. I stood up, came to the door, reached out and opened the door. A haggard, skinny man appeared in front of me. The man's condition was very poor, his face was pale, his eyes were sunken and bloodshot, he had no energy at all, and his lips were cracked due to long-term dryness. Excuse me, is Master Tianxian here? My master is not here. If you have anything to say, please tell me. I made an invitation gesture to the man, and the man hesitated and walked into Ji Yuntang. Su Tianxian went somewhere after eating in the morning. I have long been used to her behavior. I made a pot of tea for the man and then sat across from him. I looked at the man's face through the lenses of my sunglasses. There was a faint layer of black air lingering between the man's eyebrows. It seemed that something ghostly had happened to him. The man took the tea I made, took a sip, then looked around and said to me, when will Master Tianxian come back? When the man spoke, his eyes were wandering and his whole body was trembling. He seemed to be afraid of something. If you have anything to say, just tell me. The man fell into silence. After a moment, he raised his head and took a deep breath, as if he had made a lot of determination. Something strange happened at my house. Sky Coffin. Author, Ching Nian Wanba. Chapter 194. The man slowly told me about the strange things he had encountered. The man's name is John K. He is a small employee of a state-owned enterprise in Tianfu City and lives with his wife. When I was sleeping the night before yesterday, I suddenly saw my father out of the window. When John K. spoke, he looked nervous and his eyes were full of fear. Which floor does your family live on? 14th floor. I nodded and motioned for the man to continue. I didn't pay much attention at the time, I just thought I had seen it wrong. But around 11:30, I got the news that my father was critically ill. John K. got the news and rushed to the hospital non-stop. Outside the emergency room, the old lady was the center, and her children formed a circle. Brother John K. came over quickly when he saw him coming. My eldest brother told me that our dad is dying and is only breathing a sigh of relief. Your second brother and I both want our dad to be relieved as soon as possible and remove the oxygen tube, but our mother refuses to agree. John K.'s expression was relatively normal when he narrated this, but as he continued to narrate, his emotions gradually became a little out of control. My eldest brother asked me to persuade my mother, and I nodded in agreement, but just when I wanted to persuade my mother, my eldest brother stopped me again. His expression became a little serious. He told me, "Third child, be careful when you talk to mom later. Ever since our dad was hospitalized, she has often told lies." John K. came to the hospital very rarely due to work, so he didn't pay much attention to his elder brother's words. When I came to my mother, I heard her whispering something. When John K. said this, his body was shaking. He picked up the teacup on the table, took a sip, opened his mouth, but still no words came out. I asked, "What are you mumbling about?" John K. held his head in his hands and said with some pain, "She is saying that 3 more people have to die. 3 more have to die." John K. raised his head and stared at me with his bloodshot eyes, which sent chills down my spine from being stared at by him. I asked, "Why did your mother say that?" John K. took a deep breath, calmed down his excitement, and said, "When I was a child, I heard my eldest brother say that my father only had one brother. They were born with very tough characters, bad luck, and were very independent. He takes advantage of others and seldom suffers losses himself. With such a fate, relatives must not die within a month. My second uncle passed away a month ago, and that night happened to be the last day of the month. I also understand the situation John K. mentioned. This is called the 8-character conflict, which brings harm to relatives." I motioned for John K. to continue. Just when I wanted to ask my mother what she meant by the sentence, the doctor suddenly came out and told us that my dad was no longer alive. John K. and his family crowded into the emergency room, wanting to see the old man for the last time. The old man had an oxygen tank hanging on the hospital bed and tubes inserted all over his body. He was still slightly conscious and stared blankly at the white wall opposite him with his eyes open. The doctor told us that resuscitation would not save my dad's life, but would only allow him to live a few more minutes. I looked at my dad with great grief. I didn't want him to continue to suffer, so I told the doctor not to resuscitate him. When John K. said this, his expression became extremely gloomy, but the next moment he suddenly stood up and said to me in fear, "I shouldn't have made this decision. If I didn't make this decision, I wouldn't have appeared." Those Things Behind. Sky Coffin. Author, Ching Nian Wanbao. Chapter 195. John K.'s emotions were a little out of control, and I quickly said, "Calm down." John K. sat down on the chair, put his head in his hands, and took deep breaths. After a while, his out-of-control emotions gradually calmed down. "Sorry. It's okay, what happens next?" John K. continued to tell. After that, the doctor removed the oxygen tube. At 23:59, the hospital declared my father dead, but my mother suddenly grabbed my hand and yelled at the top of her lungs, "It's only 1 minute. A month has passed. It's you who ruined this family. 3 more people have to die. 3 more people have to die. Individual." After saying this, John K. slumped down on the chair and stopped talking. I looked at John K., who was so decadent, and said slowly, "If I guess correctly, you have lost a close relative." What John K. experienced was caused by the conflict between fates. Everything is God's will and not caused by evil spirits. But this does not exclude outsiders from causing trouble. John K. looked at me in surprise and asked in disbelief, "How do you know?" I said nothing to signal him to continue. John K.'s expression turned dark, and he said in a hoarse voice, "My wife passed away." After the old man died, his wife rushed over from home not long after. John K. did not tell his wife that the old man was critically ill, because her wife's physical condition was very bad during this time. She was afraid that her wife would be too sad. When my wife came to the hospital, I felt something was wrong with her. When she saw my father's body, she vomited blood and passed out. After the hospital's diagnosis, my wife had lung cancer a long time ago, and it was still in the late stage. She passed away due to excessive sadness and ineffective rescue efforts. After John K.'s wife passed away, his mother still held the small box and whispered softly. The content of the murmur was that 2 more people had to die. John K. suddenly raised his head, grabbed my hand, and begged, "Please, save me, save my family." I didn't believe this at first, but my wife died, which completely fulfilled what my mother said. Just as I was about to answer John K., I heard the door of Ji Yuntang open. Su Tianxian walked in, and said calmly, "We will help you with this matter, let's go now." John K. looked at Su Tianxian with some surprise, and I said to the side, "This is my master." John K. became extremely excited in an instant and kept begging Su Tianxian. Su Tianxian did not speak. Instead, he came to my side and said to me, "Call Huaxiu down and let's go together." I glanced outside Ji Yun Hall. The sun was shining brightly, and the sun was particularly dazzling, and I said with some confusion, "Master, can Huaxiu go out?" Su Tianxian nodded and said, "There is a red umbrella in the 3rd room on the 2nd floor, called a parasol. Huaxiu can walk in the sun by holding it." I nodded, went to the 3rd room on the 2nd floor, and found the red oil paper umbrella. I came outside Huaxiu's room and knocked on the door. After a while, the door opened and Huaxiu's pretty face poked out again. "What's the matter?" I organized my words and said, "My master asked me to ask you to go with us to do something. There is a reason why I say this. If I took the initiative to invite Huaxiu, I would definitely refuse, but it would be different if Su Tianxian was moved out." Sure enough, Huaxiu agreed, took the red oil paper umbrella from my hand and came to the 1st floor with me. In this way, we went to John K.'s hometown. The originally clear sky was instantly covered by dark clouds, and it started drizzling in a moment. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanbao. Chapter 196. On the way, Su Tianxian told me that she had found the god of death. I asked in a low voice who it was, and she glanced at John K. who was sitting in the passenger seat. I was a little surprised. Did I find the god of void death so easily? No, it should be said that he brought it to the door on his own initiative. Su Tianxian whispered to me again, "He is the last one, and destiny cannot be violated, so we must find ways to prevent his death." I nodded. This situation was indeed troublesome. It wasn't like a ghost was causing trouble. It was destiny. God wants him to die, and no one can change it. John K.'s hometown is located in a rural area in a ravine. I heard from John K. that roads have been opened in the past 2 years. The mountain the village relies on is a large coal field, and coal kilns and brick factories have sprung up, making life easier for the people. Soon, we arrived at John K.'s hometown. The door of John K.'s house was strewn with paper money, and there were even a lot of them hanging on the branches of the big trees. I don't know if it was a psychological feeling, but I felt a musty smell before I even entered the door, and the yard was eerie and filled with biting cold air. Coupled with the hazy weather, this feeling is even more intense. When I walked into the yard, I saw two men squatting by the wall and smoking. There was a morning hall in the middle of the yard. The paper ashes in the brazier were wet with rain and became dark and turbid. When one of the men saw John K. coming back, he quickly stepped forward and asked, "Lao-san, you are back. How is Zyaj's matter handled?" John K. let out a long sigh and replied, "The body has been cremated. After our father's funeral, the funeral will be held in the city." Rural old people pay attention to returning to their roots after falling leaves, but John K. doesn't think so. Cremation and burial are the best in his opinion. Boss Zhang nodded, turned his attention to us, and asked doubtfully, "Xiao K, who are these people?" John K. explained, "This is the famous Master Tianqian in Tianfu City. She is here to help our father with his funeral." As soon as these words came out, Boss Zhang was stunned on the spot. Master Tianqian. Obviously, he has also heard of Su Tianqian. Boss Zhang stepped forward and exchanged pleasantries. Su Tianqian just nodded politely. At this time, Zhang Lao pinched off the cigarette in his hand, walked over and said, "Lao, go and see our mother. She has become even weirder since Zyaj and our father left." John K. nodded and looked at Su Tianqian. Su Tianqian said calmly, "Let me see the old man's body first." John K. led Su Tianqian to the mourning hall. According to rural customs, the coffin must be kept in the coffin for 3 days after death before being buried. The coffin was wide open, and inside lay an old man. The old man was neatly dressed and dressed in a black shroud. He was clean-shaven and his mouth was slightly open, with a copper coin in his mouth. When Su Tianqian saw the copper coin, his brows instantly furrowed and he asked, "Who placed this copper coin?" Boss Zhang replied, "It's my mother. Take it out. Do you and your family want to die?" The three Zhang brothers looked at Su Tianqian blankly. They didn't understand why Su Tianqian said such things. Su Tianqian explained, "After death, there will be a breath stuck in the throat. This breath is called hoki. After death, the breath will be exhaled at a specific time. This process is called hoki. You put copper coins in his mouth to stop the scourge. The scourge will settle in the body and eventually turn into corpse chi, and he will become a zombie." When I mentioned zombies, I subconsciously looked at Huaxiu. I saw Huaxiu holding a red oil paper umbrella, noble like a princess, standing quietly not far away. Okay. Let's take out the copper coins right now." Boss John quickly started to take out the copper coins. "Stop. You can't do this." Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanbao. Chapter 197. I looked back and saw an old lady with an old face and silver hair standing in front of the mourning hall. The old lady was leaning on a cane in her right hand and holding a small black box in her left hand. The box is so simple and old that at first glance I thought it was an urn. The old lady stared at us with a pair of sinister eyes. Boss John quickly stepped forward to help the old lady and said, "Mom, do you know who this is? She is Master Tianqian. As long as she is here, my father will be able to rest in peace." The old lady pushed Boss Zhang away and said coldly, "I don't believe in Master Tianqian. I only believe in the eminent monk Guan Kong." Mr. Zhang quickly gave his second brother a wink. Mr. Zhang understood the situation and came to the old lady and said, Okay. Mom, we don't want the copper coins. We don't want the copper coins." As he said that, he wanted to help the old lady leave, but he didn't expect that the old lady was very stubborn and refused to leave no matter what. Helpless, Boss Zhang could only come to Su Tianqian and whispered, "Master Tianqian, I'm sorry, my mother is a little confused. I will take out the copper coins after she leaves." Su Tianqian glanced at the old lady, then at Mr. Zhang's body, and said it was too late. Then he walked out of the mourning hall. The old lady saw Su Tianqian leaving and sat alone on the bench next to the coffin. John K sighed and said, "Mom, I'm sorry, I'm useless. I didn't even attend my dad's funeral in time." The old lady said, "If you can't make it in time for your dad's funeral, you can make it in time for other people's funerals." I sighed to myself, this old lady started telling lies again. Boss Zhang took us to a room in the courtyard. Although the house is a little dilapidated, the environment is very good. "Master Tianqian, you can rest here." After saying that, Boss Zhang left the room. I sat next to Su Tianqian and asked, "Master, what did you just say about being late?" Su Tianqian stared at the dim and dull weather outside the window, and said slowly, "The corpse has begun to transform. I'm afraid it will be a sleepless night tonight." I asked, "Master, is there any way to stop this?" Su Tianqian shook his head and replied, "The King of Hell wants you to die at the third watch. Who dares to keep you until the fifth watch? Someone will die tonight. All we can do is try our best to prevent this from happening. As long as no one dies before the old man is buried, this matter will pass naturally." My expression became a little solemn. In the evening, I walked out of the room, and there was drizzle in the sky. When I passed Boss Zhang's room, I heard Boss Zhang and her wife talking in a low voice. I stopped and listened carefully. "Call your son right away. Tell him not to go home. Go back to school right away." "Dad, are you sure you want your son to go back to school? This is his grandfather's funeral. Isn't it unreasonable not to come?" "Reason? What more reason is there? It's not like you didn't hear what our mother said. She said 5 people would die, first the second uncle. Then our father. Xiaja passed away again yesterday. You said the 4th person, who is it?" Hearing this, I couldn't help but sigh secretly. It seems that the old lady's words have made everyone in the Zhang family panic. The old lady was still standing guard in front of the morning hall, and her expression instantly became wary when she saw me. I can only go to Zhang Ke and give him a few instructions. Zhang Ke was lying on the bed, staring at the ceiling in a daze. When he heard someone coming, he slowly sat up and opened his dull eyes and looked at me. "Master Lu." I nodded, sat next to Zhang Ke, and said, "Go and tell your family later that no matter what you hear or see tonight, don't go out." Zhang Ke asked, "Why?" I didn't tell Zhang Ke about the transformation of his father into a corpse. I could only say, "This is for your own good." Zhang Ke nodded in agreement and asked quietly, "Who will be the 4th person to die?" Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanbao. Chapter 198. I don't know how to answer Zhang Ke's question. Zhang Ke looked at me numbly. "Master Lu, is there really no way to solve this matter?" I nodded, shook my head and said, "Don't worry, we are here, we will protect you and your family." After Zhang Ke heard what I said, hope for life appeared in his originally gloomy eyes. He nodded sharply. "Tonight, I will live with Zhang Ke. Because I want to protect him from harm at all times." Su Tianqian and Huaxiu lived in the same room. At night, the rain gradually became heavier, and I heard a roar from the sky, and the rain shot down like arrows. At this time, the sound of thunder, rain, and wind mixed together, and it was as fierce as the sky was about to fall. I lay in bed tossing and turning and couldn't fall asleep. Although Su Tianqian told me that the old man's body will not transform into a corpse for the time being. As long as the death of the 4th person is prevented, Zhang Ke will not die. But I have a hunch that something bad will happen tonight. At this moment, a bolt of lightning flashed across the night sky, and the snow outside the window was reflected brightly. My eyes just stayed on the window. A pale human face came into my eyes. I was startled, sat up suddenly, and looked out the window again, only to find that the human face had disappeared. Zhang Ke saw my serious look and asked, "Master Lu, what's wrong?" My eyes still stayed on the window, and I asked, John K., is there a young man in his early 20s in your John family? A boy of about 20 years old. John K. muttered a few words in a low voice, and then said, my eldest brother's son is 21 years old and is studying in college away from home. I frowned more and more, staring out the window. John K. also followed my gaze. Another bolt of lightning flashed across the night sky, and that pale grimace appeared again. This time he was pressed against the glass, his expression ferocious and terrifying. Xiao Fan, John K. exclaimed, quickly stood up and ran towards the window. I quickly reached out to hold him. At this moment, the thunder came belatedly, and it was also mixed with a boy's strange laughter. The thunder lasted for a few seconds and then disappeared without a trace. There was no more lightning in the sky, and there was no more sound of rain, as if everything had returned to calm. John K. turned his head stiffly, with a fearful look on his face, and his whole body was trembling. Yes, he is my eldest brother's child. I didn't say anything, a bad feeling came over me. Whoa! Suddenly there was a piercing cry outside. I stood up and said to John K., follow me, don't run around. John K. quickly followed me. I came to the door and slowly opened the door a crack. In an instant, the sound of thunder, rain, and wind mixed together and swarmed into my ears. Even in such a noisy environment, I could still hear the piercing cry. I observe what is going on outside through sound analysis. With the thunder and lightning flashing in the sky, I could clearly see the scene in the yard. It was raining heavily outside, and the rain poured down along the eaves of the house, forming a rain curtain in front of my eyes. From this angle, I could clearly see the scene in front of the morning hall. In the heavy rain, a dark figure stood quietly in front of the morning hall. It was not a human being, but an animal. At this time, the black figure raised his head and screamed a few times, and the piercing cry came again. I distinguished it carefully and suddenly realized that the cry sounded a bit like a cat meowing. I took off my sunglasses and stared at the black figure closely. After careful observation, my expression changed drastically. It turned out to be a cat. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanbao. Chapter 199. My mind instantly recalled that I had heard my grandfather say before that black cats were most taboo to pass by in mourning halls or around dead bodies. Because the cat is a very spiritual animal, it has 9 lives, and if it passes by the corpse will borrow 1 life from the cat, thus pretending to be a corpse. The black cat in front of me was hunched over and jumping. I reacted instantly and ran towards the mourning hall. You must not let this cat get close to the corpse. If it gets close, the old man's corpse will definitely turn into a corpse. By then, the entire Zhang family will have no peace. I was very fast and arrived in front of the mourning hall in the blink of an eye. But the cat was keenly aware of my arrival and jumped into the coffin. I secretly screamed bad. Hearing the black cat's miserable howl, the old man in the coffin sat up. The old man's face was changing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Black cat hair actually grew on his face, and his human eyes turned into pitch black cat eyes. The old man roared and jumped out of the coffin. I quickly distanced myself from the old man. But who would have thought that the old man's target was not me, but John K. behind me. The old man who transformed into a corpse was extremely fast, and he flew past me like a gust of wind in an instant. I pinched the technique with my right hand and quickly superimposed the 9-level thunder technique to the 2nd level. I rushed towards John K., and in the process, I activated the soul-stealing blood hand. The originally blue lightning arc was instantly stained by scarlet blood and turned into a bloody lightning arc. Get out of the way! I shouted at John K. John K. was completely frightened and stood unmoved. I just watched helplessly as the old man knocked John K down. Ah! John K let out a painful roar. In a moment, I came behind John K. I raised the bloody thunder in my hand and struck the old man hard. Thunder and lightning exploded, and the bloody light instantly illuminated the entire night sky, echoing with the lightning in the sky. The whole scene was extremely strange. The old man was blown away by me, and his screams echoed in the night sky. I quickly helped John K up and checked his injuries. His shoulder was bitten by the old man's sharp fangs. The entire wound turned black and purple, and corpse poison was spreading from his wound visibly to the naked eye. At this moment, Su Tianxuan's voice suddenly came to my ears. "Let me." I raised my head, the rain blurred my vision, but I could still see Su Tianxian standing beside me holding an umbrella. I saw her right hand holding the secret, golden light flashing in her hand, and then she stretched out her slender jade hand to gently cover John K's wound, and the golden light shone brightly for a while. I stood up and looked around, trying to find the old man. I saw him in the direction of the gate, and he wanted to run away at this moment. I quickly ran towards the old man. I stopped while running. Because I saw the old man retreating step by step, trembling all over. I took a closer look and saw Huaxiu standing outside the door. Huaxiu holds a red oil paper umbrella and is wrapped in a light blue dress with a gauze outer covering, revealing her graceful neck and clear collarbones. The pleats of her skirt flow like brilliance, and her two slender jade legs are exposed to the air. Her beautiful eyes were full of coldness, her red lips opened slightly, and she slowly said two words. Court death. Sky coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanbao. Chapter 200. These two words are extremely majestic. At this moment, Huaxiu clearly displayed the domineering power of the royal family. The old man stepped back, trembling all over, his eyes full of fear. This fear comes from deep within the soul. At this time, Su Tianxian also stood up. She came to my side, drew a talisman in the void, and the golden light shone on her fingertips. The next second, a corpse-suppressing talisman appeared in front of my eyes. Su Tianxian waved his hand, and the golden talisman instantly hit the old man. The golden light penetrated the old man's body. The old man's mouth opened wide, and a bloody mist spurted out from his mouth. What a shame! Then the old man's body softened and he collapsed to the ground. I lifted the old man's body and placed it again in the coffin. Then he helped John K back to the room. "Master, how is he?" "Don't worry, his life is saved," Su Tianxian replied. I breathed a long sigh of relief. Fortunately, John K was not dead. In fact, without John K's mother's obstruction, Su Tianxian could have solved the old man's risk of corpse transformation during the day. This kind of thing wouldn't happen at night. After that, Su Tianxian and Huaxiu did not leave, but instead guarded John K with me. The next day, John K woke up. He looked around in confusion and asked, "What's wrong with me?" I briefly told John K what happened last night. He let out a long sigh of relief when he heard that the matter had been resolved. Su Tianxian said on the side, "I will accompany the funeral procession to the funeral later, and you will stay with him. As long as the old man is successfully buried, no one will die again." I nodded. John K was really not suitable to go with him in this situation. The funeral procession gathered in front of Zhang's house. They had no idea what happened last night. The funeral procession left the house and headed west along the highway. Paper money was scattered all over the street. At noon, Su Tianxian returned safely. Looking at her expression, I knew that nothing strange happened during the funeral. I stepped forward and asked in a low voice, "Master, should everything be fine now?" Su Tianxian nodded and replied, "We will stay here for one more night. Then I will use a spell to hide John K's destiny, and then we can go back." I let out a long sigh of relief. As long as John K's destiny is hidden, the double-faced Buddha of good and evil will not find Zhang Ke, and his plan will fail. After handling the old man's funeral, the Zhang family sat around a table and had dinner, and Su Tianqian and I were also sitting among them. The atmosphere of the entire dinner was a bit strange and solemn. After finishing the meal, Mr. Zhang's wife suddenly answered a phone call. After she answered the call, she screamed "Ah!" and fell to the ground, foaming at the mouth. Everyone was panicked for a moment. Boss Zhang pinched people and sprayed cold water on them. After a lot of tossing, Boss Zhang's wife finally woke up. You harmed our son." Boss Zhang's wife shouted at the top of her lungs. I froze in place for a moment, thinking of the grimace I saw last night. Could it be that Boss Zhang's son was already dead at that time? The next words of Mr. Zhang's wife confirmed my suspicion. I said, "Let our son come back." "But you didn't. He encountered a landslide on the way back to school. He's dead." Boss Zhang's son chose to go back to school because of Boss Zhang's words, but the train tickets back to school were sold out. He had no choice but to take the bus, and then encountered a landslide, and no one on the bus survived. Boss Zhang was completely stunned. After experiencing the pain of losing his father, and now the pain of losing his son, wave after wave of grief hit him. With a roar, he grabbed the axe outside the house and rushed towards the old lady's room.